Hi, welcome to the Pursuit of Truth. So this is continuing on the ICJ and President or Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel and America's response and etc. and the UK's even. What interested me is now that there's Yelda Hakim's The World Today, is it? I think it's called The World. She interviewed a member of the cabinet of Israel, and his denial of everything that Western media have been putting out. I mean, it does make I know that Western media can, lie, and I know there's anti-Semitism and racism and discrimination and all things like that human beings have, and that this could be an anti-Semitic. Because people don't like, say, Jewish people, and they're making out they're doing things that are not, or exaggerating, etc. It is difficult to believe because we've heard so many people, not only Palestinians, children and women, but also well-known, respected aid agencies like Oxfam, Save the Children, etc., who don't have, say, links, they're the outside organisations and the United Nations and etc., who have been backing up the Western pictures that we've seen of innocent people suffering. The Al Shifa hospital, we saw how that looks. It wasn't clinical. And then there's this guy who's saying that there's no famine, and he's saying that all these things, he's denying that the siege wasn't collective punishment, isn't like a form of genocide, which is what is being claimed by the ICJ. I don't know. But it interests me because this man is so passionate about. It made me think. Well, wait a minute. Do I know the truth? Because I'm getting this image from, or these words from someone, and this one from another one. How do I know which one to believe? What if he's actually telling the truth? Because he seems so passionate. Could someone lie so much or defend their country so much that they could convey that lie? But then, of course, we know Tony Blair and George W. Bush did, and they convinced a whole nation that the war in Iraq and Afghanistan was legal and legitimate. And we know that people in the past, like Hitler and etc., have been able to sway huge amounts of people to their beliefs, however insane they may be and evil. But it just made me think, I'm not trying to equivocate anything here, but it just made me think that this person, he seems so passionate and so truthful, and he's saying all these things that are opposite to, what we're seeing and what loads of people are countering, and what the ICJ, which Israel and the United States, strangely, are not members of, and the UK are even members of it, and they're even saying, well, this isn't helpful. Don't worry about war crimes. Worry about getting aid in, even though for months no one's been able to get this aid in. Or Israel say there is aid, and they're saying that people just go and walk to it. I don't know, it's just... Anyway, I'm going to play it so you can hear it, because it shocked me, because I don't know now what to believe. But I was quite surprised that if this man if it is true what we're seeing, and what we're being told by lots of independent people, if there is such a thing, because that's the problem, they could all be anti-Semites, but could there be that many? Could there be so many people that are, I know Hamas maybe influence people with the footage, or the Palestinians that are in there that could be, selecting certain things, or there could be crisis actors, or all sorts of things that could, collude this, but there's so much. I don't know, but could a person, be this, could, if it is true, everything we're seeing, there are people starving, there is, 20,000 casualties or whatever, and there are innocent women and children getting killed more than any other conflict, and the fact that they turned off the gas, water, electricity and all that kind of stuff, which they blatantly said, and then he's sort of saying, no, we're not doing anything wrong, it's everyone else.
From global leaders. So is it right for Israel and its allies to be outraged by what they're describing as a false symmetry between a democratically elected government and the actions of a terrorist group? And does that argument even apply under international law? That's the central argument that we want to unpick tonight. Is there one rule for, say, an African leader or Vladimir Putin and another for an ally of the West? The ICC's chief prosecutor, Karim Khan, has applied for arrest warrants for 5 people. Hamas leaders Yahya Sinwar, Mohammed Daif and Ismail Haniyeh are accused of crimes against humanity on October the 7th, including extermination, hostage-taking, rape and torture, and war crimes including cruel treatment and outrages on personal dignity. Arrest warrants are also sought for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. They're accused of war crimes in Gaza, including using starvation as a method of warfare and targeting civilians, as well as crimes against humanity, including extermination and persecution. Last week, the head of the World Food Programme told me there was a famine in northern Gaza, but that was strongly denied this evening by a member of the Israeli War Cabinet. Benjamin Netanyahu's close ally, Ron Dermer, insists his government does not have a policy of targeting civilians. We'll look at the merits of the ICC's case in a moment, but first, have listened to my conversation with him.
Well, it's just all false. We believe, as the American president said yesterday, that these allegations against Israel, this attempt to arrest our leaders, it was both an outrageous act and, frankly, a dangerous act. It's outrageous because of the false symmetry that he created between Israel's leaders and the leaders of a genocidal terrorist organization, Hamas. But beyond that, just the charges are false. There's no policy of starvation. There hasn't been a policy of trying to starve the population of Gaza or to target civilians in Gaza. I'm a member of the War Cabinet. We've never had such a policy. And instead of engaging with Israel and understanding the facts, he decided just to defame Israel. And I suppose this is an attempt to just deny us our basic right of self-defense, and it's not going to work.
Mr. Dermer, you're right. The U.S. president did say it was outrageous, but I also want to read to you what else he said since December 2023. He said they're starting to lose international support by indiscriminate bombing that's taking place. He's talking about what Israel is doing. Secretary Blinken said the daily toll on civilians in Gaza, particularly on children, is far too high. The U.S. president sharpened his criticism in February 2024, and he said the Gaza response is over the top. There are a lot of innocent people who are in trouble and dying.
Good example of doublethink.
Yeah, well, we are in a war, and in war, tragedies happen. And we've had during this war, as you know, Yalda, we've actually had a situation where we had 3 hostages who came out, and our forces fired on them and killed them. We've had friendly fire incidents where we've lost dozens of Israeli soldiers. That happens in war. What is the fact is that Israel has taken action that no other army fighting in urban territory has ever taken to get the civilians out of harm's way. That's not what I say. It's not what Israel says. It's what the expert on urban warfare, Ed West Point, said. It's what General David Petraeus said. He said no country has gone to greater lengths to get the civilians in an urban area out of harm's way. Those are the facts. Unfortunately, the prosecutor wasn't interested in the facts. He was interested in these libelous charges against Israel. I said to you again, I'm a member of the War Cabinet. He's basically saying that we have... And
you're going to say that because you are a member of the War Cabinet, Mr. Dermer, but you've just talked about the equivalence with Hamas. And international lawyers are saying that international law does not compare individuals with each other. It compares each individual's conduct with their legal obligations.
Correct.
So the standard is one side better than the other side. The
Correct.
Standard is international law. And the prosecutor, with a panel of experts that he appointed, says it's not one side complying with its legal obligations. And according to the prosecutor, that isn't happening.
Well, it's just false. And he should have actually looked into the case. He was due to come to Israel in, I think, about a week. He decided not to come, not to understand how Israel's system of justice works. He does not actually have jurisdiction over Israel at all. But he decided to just defame Israel based on false charges. I'm not getting into the whole issue of the false equivalent. That's right. I think it's outrageous. I think it's outrageous to put FDR on one side and Hitler on the other and say both have committed war crimes. That's not the main point. The main point is what you said, the charges themselves. And the charges themselves are false. There has never been a policy of trying to starve the population in Gaza.
So are you saying there's no famine in Gaza right now?
No, there is not. That's exactly what I'm saying. Well, there is no famine in Gaza. There has never been, and let me finish the sentence, please. There has never been famine in Gaza. That is a false story. It is a libel. Just like we are now in the International Court of Justice being accused of genocide. There is no genocide going on.
Mr.
And
Dermer,
the president himself said that yesterday.
Mr. Dermer, you say it's a false narrative. Is Cindy McCain...
I didn't say it's a false... It's not what I said. If you want to quote me back from what I said 10 seconds ago, just do it accurately. I didn't say it's a false narrative. I said it's false. It is false. There is no famine in Gaza.
You're saying it's false. There's no famine in Gaza. Tell me why then.
Let me give you some facts.
Allow me to just.
You don't want to actually.
No, I do want to hear. But I want to tell you
all the libelous charges.
What
you
Cindy
read
McCain,
all the libelous.
the executive
you can try to talk over me, but I'm going to continue to do it until you let me repeat a sentence, because you read a litany of false charges against Israel, and I'm going to respond to those false charges. Of course,
and I want you to, Mr. Dermer.
You're interrupting me again. You're not allowing me to finish the sentence, and I'm going to finish two sentences. If you'll just be a little patient, you can ask me anything you want. We have had 500,000 tons of humanitarian assistance, including 400,000 tons of food. We've had 20,000 trucks of food going into Gaza. That is not the actions of a government that is trying to starve that population.
Mr. Dermer, I'm going to ask you, you said to me a moment ago that there is no famine in Gaza. Cindy McCain, correct, the executive director of the World Food Program, joined me on this program just a few days ago and told me there is full-blown famine in northern Gaza. She said that people are dying, children are dying. She said children in Gaza are dying as skeletons. And she told me Israel is not allowing the WFP full access.
Totally false what she said. It's full-blown nonsense. You should have challenged her. You should have looked at the facts. People are not dying. They're not skeletons there. The difference between northern Gaza and southern Gaza is about 3 kilometers. I'm a father of 5 children. If there would be famine in one part of the Gaza Strip, would you not, as a mother or father, I don't know if you have a family, would you not get up and walk 2 kilometers? The whole thing is false. Unfortunately, and I have great respect for her late husband, Senator John McCain, who was a bona fide American hero. But what she said is false, and she's getting false information from people inside Gaza, probably affiliated with Hamas, who are giving her those false numbers. Just like the UN got false information from Hamas. They said there were 35,000 people who were killed. They said 75% of them are women and children. All of a sudden, 2 weeks ago, I don't know if you covered it on your show, 10,000 people cannot be identified. Now the numbers have gone way down. There are false reports from the Hamas Ministry of Health that is lying to the world. They have a baseless charge and a libel against Israel about famine, genocide, apartheid, all of this nonsense. It's all false. Unfortunately, the ICC prosecutor has believed this rather than coming to Israel, doing due process, finding out the facts for himself. He's a rogue prosecutor who himself now is above the law, running around, getting into jurisdictions that he has no business getting into. I think you're going to see a very strong response from the United States, from the United States Congress, and I think it's going to come this week.
So every major humanitarian aid agency in the world that is saying they cannot get their supplies and trucks and humanitarian aid into Gaza is lying, including David Miliband, who made a very similar remarks to me as Cindy McCain on my program, just a few weeks ago.
We just had 350 trucks go into Gaza yesterday at a time when Egypt is holding all the trucks on their side. So what are they talking about? We've had over 20,000 trucks. The problem in Gaza is not the trucks getting into Gaza. It's food getting distributed within Gaza because Hamas, a terror organization, is stealing it. Right now, we are flooding Gaza with humanitarian assistance, and the markets have shown that prices have dropped about 90% on basic food items in Gaza. Flour, all sorts of basic food items, 90%. Usually markets don't lie when it comes to supply and demand. If you want to, right after this interview, I will ask my staff to send you pictures in the last 48 hours of markets, bustling markets, fruits and vegetables in Gaza. There is no famine in Gaza. It is simply...
So, Mr. Dermer, though, the court of opinion, the images that are coming out of Gaza, what the world is seeing is something completely different. And then we have the WFP, we have various other aid agencies saying they're not getting in, they're not allowed in, that children are dying of starvation. Ultimately, though, through this ICC arrest warrant, what we're seeing is the first leader of a democratic country to be potentially indicted by the court. I mean, that in itself is something quite shameful that's now happened. Do you think
that it's shameful because it speaks?
Prime Minister Netanyahu has and the conduct that the way that this war has been waged in the last 6-7 months.
I disagree, Alta. The Jews have been singled out for about 2,000 years. The fact that the whole world will turn around the Jews and treat them differently than any other state is not a new story. It's a very old story. You have a rising tide of anti-Semitism across the world. You had people in Sydney who were chanting "Gas the Jews" 3 days after October 7th. You have people calling from the river to the sea to destroy the state of Israel. You have a Human Rights Council that passes more resolutions against the democratic state of Israel than the entire world combined. When you have countries like North Korea, Iran, Syria, you have the Houthis in Yemen committing gross violations of human rights. There's a targeting of Israel. This is not a new story. It is an old story. It is returned to a very, very ancient hatred. It is unfortunate that this is what the prosecutor has done, because he's now going to fuel the fires of anti-Semitism that you have, because people will say, wait a second, this is the International Court of Criminal Court. This is the ICC. There has to be something real in these charges. And it's not true.
Well, there isn't a history of this court being questioned when it issues these sorts of arrest warrants. And the prosecutor himself said in an interview just yesterday that he's been told by officials that, listen, these courts were created for Africans and thugs like Putin, not allies like Israel.
This court should be created, and it was in the wake of the Holocaust, to be like a permanent Nuremberg to deal with the worst crimes against humanity. Unfortunately, like many other international institutions, like the UN General Assembly, which in 1975 passed a resolution that Zionism is racism and turned itself into a joke, or like the UN Human Rights Council, which nobody takes seriously anymore, the ICC is now in danger of losing any kind of credibility. To go and bring war crimes charges against the Prime Minister and the Defense Minister of Israel, a democratic state fighting against terrorism, it's not only outrageous, it's dangerous, because it's going to start with Israel. It's not going to end with Israel. It's going to come to Britain. It's going to be your soldiers. It's going to be your leaders who are going to be in the dock, and they'll try to do it in America. And I pay attention to how America responds to it, because they are not subject to the jurisdiction of the ICC. And I think you're going to see a very strong response, a bipartisan response to this outrageous decision by the ICC prosecutor. And I hope very much that the judges will wake up and will throw these charges out, will understand, hey, look at what Israel is doing, find out the facts.
And if they don't?
Arrest warrant.
And if they don't?
Then they're going to turn themselves into a kangaroo court. And they're going to have no credibility, because everyone is going to know the facts. Just like all of a sudden the UN numbers will be adjusted for the facts in Gaza. 6 months from now or a year from now, people are saying, you know what, wait a second, there was no famine in Gaza. I think there are around 32 people who have died in malnutrition. There have been 20,000 people who have died in the United States 2 years ago for malnutrition. You're talking about children that are all bones, skin and bones, and they're all dying.
Well, that's what the WFP is saying today. They're saying they're not getting trucks in. They're saying children are dying.
A senator in the United States put up 2 pictures behind him about children apparently starving in Gaza. And both of those children had pre-existing genetic conditions that were responsible and had nothing to do with famine. This is an outrageous attack on Israel. It is a libelous attack against Israel. We are fighting a terror organization that is genocidal, that murdered 1,200 Israelis, took 250 hostage, that raped our women, burned our babies. And instead of standing with a democratic country that is fighting against terror, you're standing with terrorists, this ICC prosecutor who's embedding themselves in civilian areas.
And just briefly, I mean,
it's an outrage.
The panel of experts have said the charges have nothing to do with the reason for the conflict. The charges concern waging war in a matter that violates the long-established rules of international law.
It's just not true. And the leading expert at West Point, John Spencer, said no country has ever taken such great lengths to get civilians out of harm's way. While we're talking now, there are 950,000 civilians that have left Rafah. Why? Because we dropped millions of leaflets, just like we did in other parts of Gaza, to get them out of harm's way. That's how Israel prosecutes the war. We will continue to do it and uphold the highest international standards. That is Israel's commitment as a democratic and just state. We are fighting a just war with just means. We have nothing to apologize about. The ones who should be apologizing is the ICC prosecutor. I'm very glad to see that the Prime Minister of Britain said he was deeply troubled by this decision. I hope other fair-minded people around the world will reject it. I think serious countries will not take these charges seriously.
Okay, we'll pause there before she continues with Mark Stone. I don't know. It's very, he's very convincing, isn't he? And I did thought it was unfortunate that the I called them ICJ in the last video. Sorry, I thought it was Justice in there somewhere, but ICC. His name is Kareem something, which makes me think it was an Islamic name. Could it be that it's a misaligned thing? But you wouldn't have thought that would be possible in a major organisation. But he's claiming even the UN are, and like all these sanctions against Israel. But then I don't know. I mean, like what I've seen of the pictures, which, assuming they are real and not doctored, which they don't appear to be. I mean, like, look at Al Shifa Hospital. They said in words, much as passionate as this man, that it was surgical, and the building looks like it looks like part of Syria. It looks like it's been blown to shit or burnt or something. It didn't look surgical to me. Not like, when those pictures that you see in the 80s of the SAS jumping through windows. I think it was an IRA thing. That's what you would see as, maybe a few smoke bombs. That's what you would consider strategic. The building is still standing afterwards and still usable, whereas these hospitals are unusable. So I don't know. I'm really, it's conflicting because he seems so genuine with how he's arguing this. Could he really be? Because he's like completely saying nothing is true. Could he really lie that significantly in to another person? But the people do, though, isn't it? Like serial killers or murderers, I'm not trying to equate them, but human beings can have that ability to have murdered someone and then completely lie about it, or even go on the hunt to look for the murderer and be the murderer themselves. We've seen many cases of that. But he seems so convincing and so he's not giving any leeway. There's no famine. Israel are being maligned by organisations, but it's so many of them. But I know it's possible, but I don't know. It's just really confusing, isn't it? Because at the end of the day, I don't know. I'm not there. I'm relying on what I'm seeing and what I'm being told. This is the problem with human beings, isn't it? The ability to lie, the ability to deceive oneself and others. And this idea of him, because I can get how he can sort of truthfully say there's no policy, because I don't think there was a policy. I don't think there's a written piece of paper policy that we want to kill these people. It's probably unspoken, or it's probably a deep hatred. That's what I feel it is. It's that Israel and Palestinians don't like each other because of history. And all of this war that, that individuals probably would never have waged, because every child is born with love, and are turned into these terrorists or these people who want to fight by us, parents and institutions and etc. Because no child has that when they're born. But I don't know, it's just such a shame, isn't it? I don't know, it's like, how do we find the truth of this? And now, like the UK and the US, why, he was talking about this court, the ICC, set up after the Holocaust. Why is Israel and the United States not signatories in this, if that's the case? Why don't they want to be part of an international court that looks at international law? And how come the UK signature of it, and then this thing comes out and they just want to say, well, we're not going to listen to it, it's not helpful? And him suggesting that, that was what I was talking about, policy. There's no policy. I don't think there is a policy. I think it's just they hate each other so much that they're allowing, like the siege. The siege probably isn't a policy. It's just, we're going to turn off the electricity, gas, and everything, and no food coming in for weeks. And they're probably claiming, well, no, we didn't do that for the civilians. We did that for Hamas, and they may write that down. And therefore, legally speaking, they could argue that there was no policy. even though they did that, and even though fair-minded individuals would know that by doing that, it is a form of collective punishment, and it is going to affect, as it did, civilians, because obviously if you close everything off, then it is going to do that, and that is against international law. But of course they can say, well, we weren't doing it for the individuals, we were doing it for Hamas. And they may, in their sentiments, believe that to be the case, but that is deeply problematic. And the fact of using these big bombs that America's not supplying to them, and even America, like, they're criticising, it's like a double think. They're criticising them and saying, how all these bad things and etc. And then suddenly someone else says the same thing and says, no, well, now we want to arrest you because you committed crimes against international law. And it's like, oh, no. That's outrageous. But wait a minute, what about all the things you were saying before? It's a classic double think. You've got two conflicting views. But it's because it's your friend. If this was Russia, there's no way, that they would be, coming to their defence. But I don't know. He made a very good argument, I can say that, because he's made me double thinking, well, are we seeing the truth or not? Because we are relying on a lot of Hamas information. It is possible that people could, but all these aid organisations that have no connections to Palestine, and you're expecting people from the north to go to the south in a war zone, that it's urban warfare. It's like Vietnam, isn't it? There is no safe place, and we know that because more aid organisations have been killed than any other conflict. That's undisputed, no? If it was safe, they wouldn't be getting killed, just giving out aid. And also, it is the occupying country, by international law's responsibility, and not aid agencies or the America, to give the food to the civilians. And that thing they seem to never talk about is their job to do it. Israel should be giving that food out, should be giving that infrastructure out, and not relying on aid agencies or the Americans to build piers to do it. But no one seems to mention that part of it, or the displacement part of it, moving people. Yeah, we're so great. We're going to, you move all the way to the end of your own country that no one recognises, which I didn't realise that the UK still doesn't recognise Palestine, but Ireland just has. But you move all the way over there. You go to Egypt. They would have loved to, I'm sure, to get people to move to Egypt, and then would they ever get back again? That's what it looks like. So it's like, where's displacement? That is against international law, isn't it? Is this not displacement? No. They'll say, no, it's not displacement. We're trying to protect civilians by moving them over to there. And then they end up targeting refugee camps as well. Is that not happening? I don't know. I mean, if he is lying, I mean, how do you stand? I mean, he's part of the war cabinet and a friend of Netanyahu. How do you stand there and say, there's no famine, there's no, we're doing everything strategically and perfectly, when it's not?
That was Israel's Minister for Strategic Affairs, Ron Dermer, speaking to me there. Well, coming up, we'll go live to Washington to get reaction to that interview. What did Ron Dermer mean when he said we'd see strong action from Washington soon? I'll be speaking to our US correspondent, Mark Stone. And incredible pictures from Iran, where thousands of people have lined the streets of Qom for President Raisi's funeral procession.
The adverts? Sorry, let me forward to it.
Crimes against Israeli leaders are false and dangerous. Well, let's bring in our US correspondent Mark Stone for more analysis. And Mark, we heard there from Ron Dermer. I mean, really no surprises that he rejected these accusations and described the ICC as taking a very dangerous step. He told me that if they go ahead with this, that it would turn into some kind of
really
kangaroo court.
Yeah, no policy of starvation is what he said. Yalda, listening to him there, the first thing that occurred to me is that if all this is nonsense, if it's all lies, if it's all libel, let us in. Let us see what is actually going on in Gaza. Because remember, since October the 7th, no foreign journalists have been allowed into Gaza, and indeed some were already there. Al Jazeera have been made. It's made even harder for them to operate. Luckily, we do have our own local teams who are there, exhausted though they are managing to get pictures out, and we have seen pictures which corroborate what the ICC is alleging. He says no policy of starvation. Well, against that, you could quote, and these are quotes that the ICC has used as part of their claim for an arrest warrant, the defense minister who says, "I have ordered a complete siege on the Gaza Strip. There will be no electricity, no food, no fuel." Netanyahu himself a few weeks later says, "We will not allow humanitarian assistance in the form of food and medicine from our territory to the Gaza Strip." The president of Israel said it is an entire nation that is responsible for October the 7th. Biden has called it an indiscriminate bombing. The State Department just last week said that Israeli action and inaction by Israel contributed significantly to a lack of sustained and predictable delivery of needed assistance at scale. These are all quotes which form part of the case that the ICC, that Karim Khan is putting against the government of Israel, Netanyahu specifically.
Yeah, and Mark, one of the things he also said was that they're expecting the United States to now take action. He said, just wait and see, and that's likely to happen. And we are starting to see some of that news emerge.
Yeah, we are, and I think part of it is in this letter, which was revealed a few weeks ago, a letter by some senior Republican senators, which at the bottom of it, and I'll say it to you, I'll read it to you. It says, "Target Israel." This is a letter in today to Karim Khan, the ICC prosecutor. "Target Israel, and we will target you. If you move forward with measures indicated in the report, we will move to end all American support for the ICC, sanction your employees and associates, bar you and your families from the United States. You have been warned." That, I think, they...
I mean, he brushes over that a lot. That seems extremely threatening, no? You and your family, Karim Khan's family, and I don't know if it's other members of the ICC, will be barred from going to the United States for collecting evidence and finding a person that they're America's friendly with guilty of war crimes. I mean, really, the United States and the UK, and as a signature, and Israel should be looking at all these claims and taking it seriously. Anyone accused of war crimes, it's not something you just say, wow, no, it's not happening. Maybe for Israel it can, but the United States, as a country that claims to be, a bastion of truth and of rights and things, and the UK, shouldn't just be dismissing this. They should be looking at this very carefully and taking it very seriously. But now, this letter from the Republican Party, which I believe is Donald Trump's, to me it seems extremely threatening. And I'm surprised that this is a leaflet that they've allowed to get out, because it seems, you're just going to bar someone from entering the US, not even in power, to enter the US on the basis of making a decision that you're paid to do, or it's your job to do, and you have evidence to do it. That's like telling someone in a court, if they found Donald Trump guilty, that now you have to leave the US, or, we're going to do this and that to you. I mean, that is extremely like mafia kind of, to me, and this is government officials are writing this down and allowing people on Sky News to read it out. This is the state that we've got to, where we can speak like that as government officials. It doesn't sound very governmental. But I'm surprised that this wasn't a big deal more made of it.
Your families from the United States, you have been warned. That, I think, they will follow through on that. There is also a suggestion that Netanyahu will be invited here, perhaps to just the House, but maybe to both houses of Congress, to address them. That would be honestly a neat two fingers from the United States to the ICC. Yalda, one other thing I thought was really interesting, I think it's important to pick up on, where I thought Ron Dermer was just disingenuous, where he said, I've got kids, if you're lack of food, why don't you just get up, walk 3 kilometers further south to the markets that are full and get food. I'm paraphrasing, essentially that is what he said. The reason, of course, is because it is simply too dangerous to do that. It is more than 3 kilometers from Jabalia in the north of Gaza, right down to the south, where, yes, the markets are fuller, but you can't just get up and walk. That is disingenuous. Yes, of course, the markets in the south of Gaza have got food in them. That's the south. Gaza is 30 or so, maybe more, I think, miles long, and it is a war zone. It is not as simple as getting up and walking to the south.
Thank you so much, Mark, for all of your analysis there and for joining us to break all that down. And we're going to keep the conversation going. Next is the International Criminal Court right to seek arrest warrants for Israeli leaders. We'll be discussing that with two lawyers on either side of the debate here in the studio.
I'm just going to put that on.
Welcome back to the programme. So the International Criminal Court could soon issue warrants for senior Hamas leaders and the Israeli Prime Minister and his defence minister. It's not the first time they've done it. Well, a warrant was issued for Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir in 2009 for war crimes in Darfur. He's still at large. The former Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta was indicted in 2011 on 5 counts of crimes against humanity in Kenya, but the charges were withdrawn 5 years later. Former Liberian President Charles Taylor was found guilty of aiding and abetting war crimes in Sierra Leone by the ICC in 2012. And in March 2023, ICC judges issued an arrest warrant for Russian President Vladimir Putin for alleged war crimes committed during Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Well, with me in the studio are Yasmin Ahmed, an international lawyer and UK Director of Human Rights Watch, and Natasha Holsdorf, a barrister and legal director at UK Lawyers for Israel. Thank you both for joining us here in the studio. Yasmin, I'll come to you first. You saw the interview there with Ron Dermer. He described the ICC as, if these arrest warrants go through, as turning into some kind of kangaroo court, and said that the policy of starvation is simply not true.
Well, Human Rights Watch has documented that Israel is using starvation as a weapon of war. And what we would say is, for an independent international court, as we have seen in this situation, the prosecutor has determined that there are reasonable grounds to suspect that both Hamas and Israeli officials have committed war crimes and crimes against humanity. It will be then for a pre-trial chamber to determine whether in fact there are reasonable grounds. The idea that this is some kind of equivalency, it just does not take account of the fact that an international court such as the ICC has evidence before it. It assesses that evidence and it determines whether in fact the evidence meets the criteria, the legal criteria.
Natasha, just your reaction to everything that's happened, these arrest warrants, what Ron Dermer said, and now what Yasmin's saying.
It's really unfortunate. I mean, Robert Bernstein, the founder of Human Rights Watch, was clear already in 2009 that this is an organisation that has an anti-Israel bias and an obsessional focus on the Jewish state. The reality is that this is a first. It's the first time the International Criminal Court has sought to apply arrest warrants in a case where it simply has no jurisdiction. Israel is not a party to the International Criminal Court. The state of Palestine, so-called, does not qualify as a state under the recognised criteria in international law. So rather than an independent court here applying the rule of law, we're unfortunately seeing the exact opposite. We are seeing abuses of international law, lawfare, which is in pursuit of a political agenda, as I say, where there is no jurisdiction, but perhaps even worse than that, where there is no factual basis. Now, you heard a very full rebuttal of the factual circumstances on the ground. The reason that we are seeing the prosecutor advance this libel of starvation is that it is the only way, it seems to me, to shoehorn the situation on the ground in Gaza into the parameters that the ICC deal with, and it is doing so in flagrant disregard of the facts. And may I just come to respond on one aspect of this? Your previous commentator indicated that, if journalists were on the ground in Gaza, the situation would be clearer. There are clear parameters set out by the World Food Programme. They have indicated the daily requirement for the population of Gaza is something like 4,000 tonnes of food aid. We know the figures of food aid that have been going in. COGAT, which is the unit of the IDF.
Well, I did speak to Cindy McCain, and I put that to Ron Dermer, and Cindy McCain's telling me they're not getting anything in, and there is full-blown starvation in northern Gaza. I do want to just bring in Yasmin, because what Natasha is saying is that there are abuses of international law here. Yasmin, you say that your organisation has documented this and you have seen a policy of starvation. Can you help us understand that? Because we are hearing these phrases being thrown around. What sort of things have been gathered?
So we've documented starvation as a weapon of war. What we have said and how we have found that is that both the fact that Israel has not, and I mean, I'm not sure what facts Natasha is looking at, because the UN, independent bodies, and in fact the UK government itself has said that there is famine in Gaza. So I'm really not sure what it's about. But what we as Human Rights Watch have said very, very clearly is that it is not only the facts on the ground that people are in fact starving, that there are children. The UN have documented that there are Palestinian children that have died of malnourishment. But there are also, alongside those acts, we have seen the statements of Israeli officials which have made very clear that these are not just acts, but this is a policy of the Israeli state.
And that is what Ron Dermer was arguing against, saying we don't have an actual policy of starvation, we are in a state of war.
The policy is clear. I mean, you see statement after statement from Israeli officials talking about the fact that until Hamas is defeated, they will not allow food into Gaza. That is collective punishment of the entire Palestinian people for the acts of Hamas. That is using starvation as a weapon of war. And I might just add as well, on the point of jurisdiction, I didn't hear you or other people raising these concerns, even the UK government raising these concerns, when there was an arrest warrant for Putin.
We'll get to
Russia is not a signatory to the ICC either.
We'll get to that in a moment, but Natasha, your reaction?
No, the issue of jurisdiction comes down to this invention of a Palestinian state and the legal acrobatics.
Do you not agree with the pre-trial chamber?
And the legal acrobatics on display from the previous prosecutor, Fatou Bensouda, at the pre-trial chamber are exactly what I'm talking about in terms of international law being thrown out of the window. That is important because it has repercussions for all law-abiding states and for anyone who actually cares about the rule of law and international legal order. But when we come to look at the facts on the ground, all I'm asking is that we apply numbers that we know about. So the World Food Programme, as I was about to come on to explain, has set out already in October of last year what the nutritional requirements of the population of the Gaza Strip are.
That same World Food Programme is now telling me, though, that there is full-blown starvation.
Based on Hamas propaganda, which unfortunately the international media seem to have very little difficulty in repeating.
Cindy McCain is basing it on her staff on the ground.
Well,
that is what she's not quoting Hamas.
May I finish on the numbers? Because we know, and in fact, Ron Dermer's numbers seem to be a little bit out of date. The most recent update from COGAT is that in excess of 500,000 tonnes, 500,730 tonnes thereabouts, we're looking at nearly 30,000 trucks of humanitarian assistance over the last 7 months.
So how is starvation happening?
Let's not
may
I finish the point? There are two aspects here.
It'd be useful to know why you're saying, why is there starvation then?
Let me answer.
Or are you saying that there's no starvation?
Well, you've just heard Ron Dermer, who has more information than I think all of us put together.
And more than the UN and aid agencies on the ground.
May I finish my sentence? Saying that there is no starvation in Gaza. But what we do know is that a couple of weeks ago, the last time I checked, there were 650 trucks which were inspected by Israel that were piling up on the border of Gaza post-inspection.
Rafah, the Rafah crossing where Israel has closed. Is that where you're talking? Whereabouts are they piling up? Sorry, but whereabouts are they piling up?
After inspection at Nitzana and Kerem Shalom. If you stop
Kerem Shalom, they have not even been at that. You know why they're banked up at Kerem Shalom? Is because humanitarian organisations cannot get to Kerem Shalom because it's so dangerous.
Well, because we have...
And because you know what? Humanitarian organisations have been targeted by Israel.
No.
We documented 8 incidences. Human Rights Watch just came out last week. 8 incidences where humanitarian convoys were in fact targeted by Israel. Despite the fact that they had supposedly been deconflicted.
Yasmin, I'll just get Natasha.
What we do know from the Fatah authorities, and these are the so-called moderates that run the Palestinian autonomy in the West Bank, is that Hamas are targeting humanitarian aid workers in order to generate a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. We also know that aid organisations on the ground are struggling with distribution because Hamas is stealing aid.
Not because they're being targeted by Israel.
No. Israel doesn't target humanitarian aid workers.
No, so what happened with those incidents? What happened with World Central Kitchen, with the medical aid for Palestine?
The people who have been on the ground the real
But they
experts
didn't
here
happen?
have been clear that the measures that Israel takes to prevent civilian casualties, including providing humanitarian corridors, I mean, the gentleman
There
earlier
is
was
nowhere
suggesting that
safe
people
to
cannot
go
move.
in
Well, that's
Gaza.
nonsense, because 900,000 people
So all of
have
the
just moved over the last 2 days.
about 30 seconds to
It's
go.
not borne
Natasha,
out by the
I'll give you
reality
about
or the
15
facts on the
seconds.
ground. And
I don't
all
know
that
what
we're
reality
saying-
that you're speaking
And
about, because it's not a reality that the UN or anyone else.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was quite interesting to hear them talk about it and argue about it, I guess. But it's the same argument. Seems to be one side saying that these things are happening, and the other side saying, no, there's plenty of food. They worked out how much they need. Maybe there is food somewhere, but there's just no way to get it to the people, which is what Israel, as the occupying power, is meant to be doing. But they're leaving it to aid agencies, the United Nations, to do it, and maybe they're finding it too dangerous. Probably why Israel aren't doing it themselves. But I suppose you could sort of claim, I don't know, if there is all that food somewhere, but that's not where the civilian population is. But should the civilian population have to move from one end all the way to the other to get food when they were living in their own country that's not even recognised by? And that's another thing, like they're saying that, well, the ICC can't do this because there's no such thing as the state of Palestine, even though it was before it was on the map. How do we determine who gets to decide what's legitimate country and what's not? Don't know, but interesting anyway. Now I don't know what to believe anymore, is it? Who's telling the truth? Who's lying? Are they both telling the truth? Is there suffering and famine going on in Palestine and Gaza or not? Are they committing war crimes or not? The ICC are saying they are. Aid agencies seem to be saying they are, but governments are practicing George Orwell's doublethink by 1 minute saying, yes, Israel are doing things not in the best possible way, and they're quoting UN Hamas numbers of casualties and saying there's too many and this, that and the other, and then the next minute saying that, but they're not committing war crimes. When there's meant to be reports in the UK, I don't know about America, that suggesting that they've already looked at this and possibly there have been war crimes committed and we may even be involved in them because we supply weapons or because we have backed it, as it were, by words and deeds and etc. So I don't know, which is, it's like a new complete turn now. It's like Winston in 1984 where he's changed the newspapers and now like everything's okay and nothing wrong was been going on. This is the world we live in, where you can watch something and then suddenly be told something else, and then you can think, well, I don't actually know what's going on now. Who's telling me the truth? That's the kind of world we live in when we don't know the people that we trust. Who's telling the truth? Take care, take it easy, bless, and peace.